Welcome back to Better Together, the podcast where we get real about what it takes to build a business and a life that work together. I'm Shawn Sundsvold, joined by my co-host and partner in life and business, Kelly Sundsvold. Today's guest is Ethan Bull, co-founder of Pro Assisting, a firm that's redefining executive support through high-level fractional EA services for business owners and C-suite leaders. Alongside his wife and business partner, Stephanie, Ethan also co-created the Pro Assisting Academy and co-authored the book, The 29-Hour Workday, a high performer's guide to leveraging your executive assistant. With decades of experience supporting top CEOs, which included billion-dollar organizations, Ethan brings a rare inside look at leadership, delegation, and trust. We'll be talking about what it's really like to build a business with your spouse, how executive support is evolving, and what leaders need to grow sustainably without burning out. If you're a founder feeling stretched thin or a leader looking for a smarter way to scale, this episode is definitely for you. Let's dive in. Ethan, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Well, let's kind of start at the beginning. How did the two of you come up with the idea to start Pro Assisting, and what was going on in your life that made you kind of decide this was the thing to do?
Well, our business started based on our experience. And we lived in New York City 20 years. We were both high level executive assistants. And when we say that, we were supporting principals, most likely the CEO or the COO of a large organization. And we were their business partner, chief of staff, project manager, assistant slash scheduler, if you will, and personal assistant. So in those seats, you really provide comprehensive support with the overarching goal of giving back time. Then you fast forward to us having our second son, and instead of jumping back into the nanny game in New York City, we decided to quit our job, sell our condo, and do something I swore I'd never do, which is move back home. And I am actually sitting a block away from the house I grew up in that my mom still lives in half the year. And so when you change your environment from New York City and the experience that we had and the compensation we were making, and we move to a totally different socioeconomic area, I was fortunate enough to land a role that was commensurate with my experience. Stephanie was a stay-at-home mom. And in 2017, a friend of ours reached out and said, "Hey, I have this client. She's a Fortune 100 consultant. She travels the world. She needs great support. She doesn't care where you are, and she doesn't need full time. Are you interested?" And that was in 2017. And it cut us down this path of taking a look at the virtual slash remote support space in the United States, as well as what was happening abroad,
Mm-hmm.
overseas virtual assistants. And we kept running into the same business model of, US based virtual assistant companies charging $60 an hour and paying their assistant $18 or $20 an hour, and partnering them with a large number of clients, meaning one assistant could support 8, 10, 12 clients a month.
Mm-hmm.
And our experience was kind of screaming at us and saying, that doesn't work in terms of what providing great support looks like, comprehensive support at the level we're used to. And we kept seeing that over and over again. So there's this gap between where the virtual assistant space is and a full-time assistant. And so we decided, after I left Rochester Regional Health, to take a leap and start Pro Assisting, which we launched in 2018 to fill that gap.
Very
That's
cool.
really great. Sometimes that we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. We're entrepreneurs, obviously, ourselves too. That jump, whoa, that can be scary. Yeah. But, more often than not, you either learn a lesson or you learn from, continued lessons. So you went from being like a high level EA to running a company that trains and provides EAs. What's the hardest shift going from actually being part of like the execution sort of job to the president and business of a company that provides EA services?
It was gradual. So we started our business to fill ourselves up with clients. I took on 3 clients. Stephanie took on 3 clients. And then the clients kept coming, and we found assistants that agreed with how we view the role to partner with those clients. So it was a very gradual process of moving. Stephanie still supports clients today. I passed off my last client November of 2024. So it's just been a little bit over a year. that I've been just solely running the business. So it was gradual, but a lot of the aspects of being a great executive assistant, frankly, come down to just figuring it out, quote unquote, if you don't know it. So quarterly taxes or
Mhm.
forming an LLC or getting a DBA under that LLC or, what does it look like to track expenses? What does it look like to track clients and assistants? And what's the marketing funnel for how do we get those people to come look at us? And so it was gradual, but yet a lot of times, sometimes executive assistants sell themselves short in terms of how resourceful they are and how
Mhm.
much they can quote unquote just figure it out. And given that it was gradual, it gave us the time to do that.
Yeah. And I know, like, just kind of going along that line, like hiring an EA, especially for a founder or a leader who's hiring one for the first time, right? It can feel overwhelming. There's all the questions of, you know, what should I have this person do? How much of my business are they going to see? How much of that sensitive information are they going to be dealing with? I know, like, we kind of went through that when we hired our first EA of like, oh my gosh, they're going to see my books. Oh my gosh, they're going to see my emails, all these things that you've held really, really tight as a founder, right? How do you guys help leaders through that conversation and getting them to kind of learn to trust and partner with that EA?
It's a gradual process. Seeing the books, I don't know if that's necessary, and it is a gradual process. You really need to create that know, like, and trust foundation
Mhm.
initially. That being said, we also encourage clients who've never partnered with an assistant. You do have to kind of grasp hands and jump off the cliff from a trust perspective. We do everything we can from our perspective to put a client at ease around information security, confidential information, personal information. But frankly, for a high level executive assistant, that's a cornerstone of the role. It's kind of like the Hippocratic Oath or attorney client privilege. There's no legal standing around that, but high level EAs do that. And the thing with us is that we charge based on resources and we pass more than 75% of incoming retainers to us directly to the assistant. And what that allows is it allows us to get high level talent who've done this for years or decades and who would command six-figure salaries as high level EAs in metropolitan areas, and that kind of confidentiality and onboarding of a new client who's never had an assistant comes kind of like batteries included.
Okay.
And so, um, not to say that it can't be nerve-wracking, and the biggest hurdles that we encounter is the quote unquote, "I can do it faster myself" mentality, where they're not thinking of, "Hey, if I actually train my EA how to do this, I never have to do it again." And that time compounds month after month, year after year. But the other one is what information can I give them? And what does this look like? And in those situations, we're looking at industry specific. Are you dealing with finance or, are the clients, high net worth individuals, very sensitive information? Are we dealing with a non-executive board director of a publicly traded company? So we're making sure that the assistant isn't directly invested in that company and that that assistant isn't in that board member's email. So they would not be exposed to potentially sensitive information that could be used in an insider trading kind of situation. So it is kind of situation to situation specific,
Mhm.
but those are some of the challenges, and there's no doubt about it. And that's where partnering with an executive assistant in that first 2 to 4 weeks, you really wanna just work on the small stuff and get that again, those things right to where that sense of know, like, and trust is really built.
Yeah. I'm curious, as you're, I don't have a better way to say it, but like marrying a leader and an EA together, what is that? I know you kind of talked about it a little bit there, but what does that first month look like how do you guys have like a process that helps build that trust to help kind of the two work together?
We use a new client questionnaire, which is used to cut down the learning curve on all of the little questions. that go back and forth. What's the makeup of your family? Where do you like to sit on the airplane? What time do you want to get to the airport? What do you want your calendar to look like? What times of day do you perform best? What is non-negotiable on your calendar? Who are the VIPs in your life? We're trying to extract all that information really in the first and second call, onboarding call. But during that process, it's a dimmer switch of onboarding and work and not the flick of a switch. So even
Mhm.
on your first onboarding call, you could be going through your calendar with your new assistant and you could be like, I totally forgot to change that eye appointment and I got to meet with that client. And the assistant should be saying, well, what's the name of the doctor? Okay.
Mhm.
Is it in your contacts? Okay. I will move it. When would you like to have it? If they can't, how should I think about moving that would fall within your parameters so I don't have to come back and forth and check and check and check to get that time. And so right there, you're onboarding, but you're also starting work.
Yeah.
And that's what we find. And it's again, if you're dealing with someone who's done this a lot from the assistant side, it can happen very well. They have done this before, so you should lean into that. But also, we deal with a lot of clients who have long histories of working with executive assistants. They know what they want. They've done this.
Mhm.
They know what
Yeah.
they want to look and feel like. So I do, it's one of the reasons we wrote our book, as an instruction manual for how to leverage your assistant.
Yeah.
But we have run into clients, most likely past clients, who can't give up the reins, who are, you know,
Yep.
just, if a word is off in an email, it's going to look poorly on me or I've got to see everything or, it kind of defeats the purpose. And that's okay as long as they're running a business that can sustain that.
Mhm.
And they like it where it is and they're not looking to 2x, 4x, 8x their business. So again, it comes in all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, for sure. And it's finding the right personality. Our EA, oh my God, I don't know where we'd be if we didn't have her. She's fantastic. And, that building of trust is just so critical. So I know you're a husband-wife team. You mentioned your wife earlier in this conversation. Obviously, we're a husband-wife team as well. And we get asked a lot like, well, how is it difficult working with your spouse? And, we say, well, we've been married for this is going to be 22 years. We've been married for 22 years and it takes a little bit to get there. It's not like if we were to do this 10 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are. So what is one surprising adjustment that you had going from being married to being co-founders together?
Well, there's an interesting thing in terms of even way before we started the business, and I think it kind of shaped our relationship in a certain way. When we were in New York City, and I was working in at an ad agency for the chief operating officer, and I was director of admin services. So I was a team of about 12 assistants. Stephanie was supporting the CEO of a hedge fund, and same roles
Mhm.
technically, both executive assistants, but she was making about 4 times the amount of compensation that I was making.
Wow.
Wow.
And so her compensation and work history is what allowed us to get our mortgage on our condo. And we closed right in June of '08. And then Lehman crashed in September of '08 and the price
Yeah.
decreased by 50%. And that compensation of Stephanie's was a lot based on bonus. So there was stress there. And I had to deal with my ego and understanding that I wanted to be able to wear jeans and a baseball hat to work and a t-shirt and work in a cool ad agency where she had to get dressed to the nines every day and be there at 7:30 and get home at 7:30. And so understanding that there's trade-offs to the two different kinds of roles, but having those conversations about finances and being on the same page, it's the advice we give to all either newlyweds or newly engaged people that meet us and they're like, "Oh, you guys look so happy and how do you do it?" And it's all like, be on the same, not it's not sexy,
Yep.
but be on the same page financially. And then in terms of transitioning that to business owners, that really set a strong foundation, but also we're both pros at being EAs. So I don't need to tell her how to do her job and she doesn't need to tell me how to do mine.
Yeah.
And the thing is that creating more of a lifestyle business and finding clients to work with us. I had my 3 clients and she had her 3 clients.
Yeah.
They didn't cross. You
Yeah.
know, it was made the decision was made that she would keep her 3 clients and I would transition off over a long period of time. And I'm the entrepreneur. I'm the one with the ideas. She's the one who puts the guardrails on. But in terms of us running this business, she's much more on the strategic side and the advisory side. And I'm much more in the weeds in terms of managing our pool of assistant partners and having every sales conversation, dealing with disgruntled clients. That's all on me.
Mhm.
But her and her serving her clients and acting as that strategic soundboard for me is the amazing foundation of our business that gives us comfort. So we're in a situation where we don't have to cross paths during the day. I'm in my desk in my office. She flutters around the house and has different spots where she works, and she goes to the coffee shop and whatnot. And
Yeah.
then we come back and either go on a date night or even at dinner when where either of us are making dinner or whatnot and have a conversation about how the day went or whatnot. Or if I have to surface up any questions or thoughts like, hey, we need to adjust here, or do this. What do you think? So it really, it's kind of a very symbiotic relationship, but I would really pinpoint it back to us having to deal with those financial issues really at the start of our marriage.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, those money conversations are so important because like you can love somebody all you want, but if you can't afford to live, like there's a big problem, right? Like love's not going to get you to pay your mortgage, you know? So kind of on that line and you briefly touched on it there and talking about kind of how your rhythm is in the evenings and things like that, but as you guys have grown your business, what like boundaries or, rhythms have you and Stephanie created between the two of you to protect your personal relationship from being like an all business all the time type of thing?
In the first couple years of the business, she would have to say when we were on date night, okay, no more talking about business.
Mm,
That's not really an issue much anymore.
Mhm.
And we've gotten into a good groove. But the thing about being a great executive assistant, and this is in both of our bloods, is that we could get a text at 8:13 in the evening when we're on date night. It's not out of the ordinary. So we don't get buffered or buffed around by that kind of stuff much. Um, and we both have deep empathy for each other and what we do in our roles. So she understands that if I have a bad sales call or something happens in the business or that can weigh on me. And I know that, I mean, frankly, one of my clients we passed to Stephanie. And even in that client specifically, she can say 3 words to me and I know exactly what she's dealing with that client. Not in a bad way, just in a all right, here we go. We're jumping in.
yeah.
So it's it, it in the beginning, in the first few years, when the financial pressure was more, and the worry that it was all going to just go away, that inherent stress that I was not expecting of being a business owner and moving from a W-2 employee to a business owner, that first 5 years was it always crept up, and we're in our 8th year now, so it's getting smoother.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean, it it's hard. You work together and, it sounds like you and Stephanie have really worked those are things that, I think Sean and I, we have very good communication as far as like we've heard that no more work tonight or
Yes.
can we pause this until tomorrow? And there's respect there and there's understanding because it goes both ways. There's some days that, he's really maxed out or there's some days I'm really maxed out or tired or have a headache or something, like there's a slew of things. And, I know all of us on this call have kids too, and there's kid stuff that come up. And so, finding that time for your spouse, can be just a really beautiful thing because we had a meeting right before this and I stepped out. We had 10 minutes between that and this and being able to have that quick, like, hey, did you know XYZ? And it was something more relational and, having those moments throughout the day is actually really nice and being able to have some FaceTime with your spouse. Kind of shifting gears a little bit and talking about the ebook that the two of you co-authored. It's titled The 29-Hour Work Week, a high performer's guide to leveraging your EA. We all have the same 24 hours in a day, right? Tell us, what was your inspiration for the book and how can leaders who are utilizing the support of an EA, What would they find out of this book?
Yeah, I mean, it actually was a published book, so, you can get it in hard copy or digitally. I would point you could put something in the show notes where you can sign up for our email list, and you can get access to either the audiobook or the PDF version for free.
Perfect.
But the purpose of writing the book was to kind of create an instruction manual for either executives who have an assistant and don't feel like they're getting the most out of them, or for an executive or principal who has never used an assistant and wants an instruction manual. But we also coach EAs to use the book as kind of a pillar in their conversation with their principal around, I can support you at this level and you are not meeting me there at the moment. Do you,
Mm.
so it is a two-way street and can open a conversation, but really it was about codifying how Stephanie and I view great support. And that is based on it's almost 50 years of experience combined. So there's a lot of personal anecdotes and stories in the book. Whether it's me in the first few pages running to get strawberry jam for Nastasia Kinski when we were making the movie Town and Country at 4 a.m., or it's Stephanie dealing with a, high-powered situation when you're dealing with millions or tens of millions of dollars and project managing the build of a $50 million mansion on the coast of Connecticut and everything in between. So we decided it would be good for our prospective clients who've never had an assistant or were looking to partner with a great assistant and how they could do that. And yet we've also found other ways to leverage that book, as I said, by pointing EAs to it specifically as well.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, one of the things that you mention in that book is talking about your EA's superpowers, right? I'd love you to maybe dive into that just a little bit more about understanding, like, how as leaders we can really utilize those EAs.
Yeah, I mean, superpowers. I mean, I've had people on sales calls, potential clients say, "Look, I just want my Pepper Potts from Iron Man." That human back at the office who knows all and is thinking 4 steps ahead and, can be your lifesaver. And it can feel that way, but it takes that relationship, it takes time, and it
Mhm.
takes context from the principal to the assistant over that time period to get to that spot. It's not magic, but a good EA is usually a type A personality who's pretty buttoned up and learns through repetition and learns through the emotional intelligence that they use to discern what the principal likes, what they don't like, what they want versus what they need. And then also having the open lines of communication, it it takes time, and then when it happens, it feels like magic. It feels like a superpower, but it's actually just doing the work to get there.
Mhm.
So if you can identify a great EA and an EA who can think like that, be sure to trust them. Be sure to provide the context, even though it may take a couple minutes longer. Be sure to include them on emails that you may think they don't need to know about. But by doing that, you're giving them more context that may help them down the road. But you're also signaling to people outside of the sphere of the two of you, this is an important person for me, they're privy to this information, lean into this. So it's a combination of all that. We use the superhero analogy or the clairvoyant, mind reading, 3 steps ahead, look around corners as euphemisms, but it's really about putting in the work beforehand rather than expecting that right out of the gate.
I mean, if we all had Tony Stark's assistant, I'd be curious what it was like when Tony was training her. What's one thing that you wish that every business owner would understand about time, energy, and the power of support? Which really like just sums up everything we've just talked about.
Hmm.
It's just about letting the assistant in and giving them the context they need that may feel like it's overkill, but will create that relationship down the road where you have a shorthand, where, in 7 minutes, you're able to take your to-do list of 13 things down to two. And those other 11 things the assistant is often doing on your behalf, moving the ball forward. Can you take a stab at it?
Hmm.
There's a whole all the context that happened around that
Yeah.
first deck is inherently a subordinate in that relationship. That being said, the good principals can be self-deprecating and rise their assistant up to be that peer level, even
Mm,
when they're not, but they can give them the feeling as if they are a peer, and that opens lines of communication, both the good
Mhm.
and the bad.
yeah.
And there we also hear a lot from clients who say, "Look, I want my assistant to tell me what to do. I want them to push me." And I say, "Time
Yeah.
out. Time out. They're a subordinate relationship. They're not
Mhm.
gonna do that until you've encouraged them enough to do that in a very authentic way.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're not gonna get that, because a lot of times people say something that they think they want, but when they get it, they don't actually want it."
Yeah, I think that's really just that elevation, and it reminds me so much of, and I think I told you this when we had our first conversation. My dad was an entrepreneur, had his own business, and his executive assistant, like to this day, like I remember that relationship and how like you talked about almost an equal, but like, a peer. Like literally everything went through my dad's assistant Nan. Like
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And she was just amazing in how and how much she was able to handle and what she could do and just, just all the things that she was as far as like how it helped my dad be able to manage his business. So as you're talking about this, I'm having lots of fond memories of like that relationship that my dad had with his assistant. And I'm sure that's kind of the same thing you strive for in how you want your principals and EAs to work together.
Yeah, totally, and that goes back to my stepfather, who was an attorney and ran his own law office, and whenever he had a new client come in, he would have he called them back then a secretary, and, he'd bring his secretary in and he'd tell the client, "You need to talk to Sheila here.
Yeah.
She's the one. She's gonna know your court date, she's gonna know the status of filing, she's gonna know what we're waiting on from experts. She's going to know all that information. And you don't really need to talk to me, but I'm always here. And then if you do need to talk to me and she discerns that you do need to talk to me, she's going to get us connected as soon as possible. But you're much better off going to her first and asking your questions, because frankly, she's going to know more about your case than I am in any given moment."
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So kind of looking at 2026 and moving forward as we wrap up our conversation today, what are some things that you guys are going to be doing in 2026 that are going to kind of help you be successful? And what are some of the goals you have for this year?
Consistency, keep doing what we're doing. From a business perspective, it's really about making sure that that we're doing everything we can to meet the client where they are and decrease any churn or any potential client leavings. It happens from a business perspective where a business declines and then they need to tighten up their balance sheet. And sometimes that includes getting rid of their EA, totally understandable instances. It's really about how good are we at the onboarding process, at the aligning on expectations. So that's one thing. I really think it's it's a stressful and exciting time. For business services in general, I think that artificial intelligence obviously is playing a role. It's playing a role just in the mentality of the boards and the C-suites of companies, where the expectation is I need to decrease operational expenses to, catch up with my competitors. So let's infuse the company with AI. And I think Silicon Valley over the last especially year has been very good at telling a story that I don't think in a lot of instances meets reality when it comes to artificial intelligence, but it's getting closer. And so I think that the rise of
Hmm.
whether you're talking about fractional C-suite or fractional business service providers, I think really can allow those small and medium-sized businesses to punch above their weight,
Hmm.
and cover a much wider swath of their business needs and operational needs with a decreasing operational expenses, but leaning into the fractional and not hiring full-time employees. And so there's a lot of strategic decision making, I think, that can happen in that
Hmm.
space. And us as fractional executive assistants, I see being a bridge from, that full time executive assistant who was sitting in the office next door to when we have chips implanted in our brains and we wake up and we already know what we have to do and everything's already determined.
Yeah.
There's a big long bridge there, and I think we're entering that time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. So, how can people get in touch with you? Obviously, you have your book, you have a lot going on. How can people get in touch with you?
Our website is proassisting.com, proassisting.com. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn, Ethan Bull on LinkedIn. And yeah, you can check out both mine and Stephanie's profile to see our history, but then also find Pro Assisting. And yeah, we love helping clients and business leaders get time back.
Yeah, and just as we wrap up, I think that's so important. Like time is such a valuable resource, right? We often trade time for money,
Emo-
right? That's the conversation. But, the more time we are able to kind of have control of, I think that's really where autonomy sits, right? And freedom sits. So I love how you kind of wrap that up. So, Ethan, thank you so much for being on the show today. Loved having the conversation and, look forward to talking to you again in the future. Thank you.
It's been great. Thanks so much.